hard truth about playing a good horror game is that the characters of the story find themselves in some sort of danger. Whether that's in the form of zombies trying to rip them apart or ghosts trying to essentially torture them to death. Horror games always pose a major risk to each and every character associated with the main story of the game. And unfortunately, some of these characters don't have a happy ending. In fact, there's plenty of horror games out there that feature some sort of tragic death that sticks with us long after the credits roll. Which is exactly what I want to focus on with this episode of Nerdspace Games. Today we'll be taking a look at every death scene in a horror game as I give you guys the saddest ones out there. Before we get started though, obviously there needs to be a massive spoiler warning for today's video. Clearly we'll be covering the death of major characters in horror games, so if you want to avoid major spoilers for specific horror games on this list, please use the timestamps below to skip around to different chapters. The chapters will be labeled with the game title instead of the character's name, that way it makes it easier to avoid spoilers. Oh, and for the sake of today's list, we are only looking at the canon versions of each horror game. This means I won't be counting the deaths of certain characters and alternate endings or routes. And like with most of my ranking videos, I'll only be including one entry per franchise. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is my top 10 saddest deaths in horror games. Let's get it. Number 10, Myra, The Evil Within 2.
We're finally together again.
There's no other choice. This is part of the plan. It always has been. I'm sorry.
Myra.
Shh. Just promise to take care of the little one. Never let her forget how much her mother loved her.
Honestly, Sebastian has one of the most tragic backstories out there. The poor guy has gone through hell. He lost everything, got everything back, and then lost something else in return. He's had to watch his friends and allies die around him constantly, and he's had to face his worst nightmares over and over again throughout both games. In the first game, we are led to believe that Sebastian lost his daughter in a fire. However, the second game reveals that his daughter Lily is actually still alive and that she was kidnapped by a secret organization known as Morbius. His wife, Myra, found this out before he did and left Sebastian in order to pursue their daughter and get her back. Unfortunately, this led to Myra becoming trapped in the same world that Lily was trapped in. At the end of The Evil Within 2, Sebastian finally reunites with not only his daughter Lily, but also his wife Myra. Unfortunately, this is short-lived as it turns out that Myra had set up a plan to sacrifice herself in order to prevent Morbius from tracking down Lily and Sebastian after they escape. She activated a self-destruct sequence that would activate the execution chip on every operative of Morbius, killing anybody that hadn't removed the chip out of them yet. Sadly, this meant that Myra would die within Stim as Sebastian was forced to say goodbye to his wife. He escaped Morbius and had his daughter back, but it cost him his wife, who had sacrificed everything in order to make sure her husband and her daughter were safe and together again. Number 9, Christopher Samuels, Alien Isolation.
Samuels, you're dying.
You talk like I've had an actual life. I thank you for that.
Samuels.
The Apollo transit is open. Once you get into the core, it will talk to you.
You did that for me.
I wanted Amanda Ripley to have closure.
In a game like Alien Isolation, in which everybody can and will probably die, ironically the most tragic death of the game goes to an android of all people. At the start of the game, Samuels joins Amanda and Taylor as they head into the space station that's holding the flight recorder of the Nostromo, the same ship seen in the first Alien movie. Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's daughter, joins Samuels and Taylor as they head to the space station to recover the flight recorder and hopefully get closure for Amanda on her missing mother. Unfortunately, when they arrive, the space station is a mess thanks to the xenomorphs wreaking havoc and the androids here following a new protocol that allows them to hurt and even kill civilians. After doubting Samuels at first, Ripley reunites with him only to find out that he's actually doing what he thinks is best for her. See, he found a way to try and get the flight recorder data and sacrifices himself to make sure Ripley gets that closure that she so desperately needed. Samuels might be an android, but he comes off as more humane than most of the humans Ripley encounters on this space station, and the fact that he was willing to sacrifice himself just to give Ripley closure definitely earned him a spot on today's list. Number 8, Seiko, Corpse Party.
Help me! Help me!
Corpse Party is a pretty intense visual novel horror game. Actually, let me give you a big trigger warning before I talk about this entry a little more. Anyway, there's actually a ton of deaths to choose from, as almost every single death in this game is truly a tragic one. From a high schooler being betrayed by his own best friend to a teacher sacrificing herself to save her students, every death in this game hits hard in different ways. Still, none of them hit harder than the first main character death of the game, Seiko. After waking up in Heavenly Host Elementary School, two of the main protagonists of the game, Seiko and Naomi, find themselves separated from the rest of their friends. They immediately began searching for their friends, only to run into dangerous ghosts around every corner. Eventually, Naomi hurts her ankle and Seiko brings her to the infirmary. Afterwards, Seiko leaves in search of her charm and also to investigate a voice that she believed to be one of their friends. While gone, Naomi is attacked by a ghost. After barely escaping, Naomi and Seiko reunite, but Naomi is extremely frustrated and takes out her anger on Seiko, to the point where Naomi doesn't even seem to be herself at all. This causes Seiko to leave Naomi, and later Naomi finds Seiko in a bathroom stall hanging from the ceiling. But unfortunately, it gets much worse. Later in the game, Naomi learns that a ghost possessed her and made her kill Seiko. This was a dark and tragic moment for both characters, and even though the game features a lot of tragic moments, none of them hit harder than Seiko's and the reveal of Naomi's hands being the one to carry out the murder. Number 7, Harry Mason, Silent Hill 3.
No! No! No!
Okay, so this is a hard one to rank, as technically Harry Mason dies in two different ways in the Silent Hill universe. So for the purpose of today's video, I'm only going to be focusing on the canon death of Harry Mason, which is the one that we see in Silent Hill 3. And I know, while there's an argument that could be made that his death is sadder in Silent Hill Shattered Memories, I personally believe that's not his death that's extremely sad in that game, but rather the twist ending and the situation around his death. Anyways, in the original Silent Hill, Harry Mason was the main protagonist. After crashing his car in Silent Hill, he begins searching the town for his missing adopted daughter, Cheryl. In his search, he eventually learns that Cheryl was actually a split version of Alessa, a young witch here in Silent Hill who was tortured and used by her mother, Dahlia. It turns out that Alessa called Cheryl here in order to kill both versions of herself so that she can escape the torture that she had suffered all of these years. Anyways, after stopping Dahlia's ritual, Alessa and Cheryl were reborn once again as an infant, in which Harry took the newborn baby and escaped with her. Despite everything that he had been through, he chose to raise this baby and she went under a new name, Heather Mason. Fast forward to Silent Hill 3, a new villain came into the picture, Claudia Wolf. As someone that grew up with Alessa, Claudia wanted to finish the ritual as she believed that's exactly what Alessa wanted. In order to motivate Cheryl to come back to Silent Hill, Claudia had Harry Mason killed. While this happens off screen, Heather coming home to her father and breaking down as she learned that he had died because of her was devastating to watch. However, it also hit really hard for the players because Harry Mason was the caring father that fought through heaven and hell to save his daughter in the first game. And spending that time with him and then seeing him meet his demise in Silent Hill 3 hit extremely hard. Number 6, Chiaki Nanami, Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair.
But still, I want to protect everyone by any means. And I'm happy that I'm able to do that.
So most people probably wouldn't consider Danganronpa a horror game, but with the elements seen in these games, which revolves around friends killing and betraying each other for their own selfish desires, yeah, I feel like it does enough to be considered a horror game in my book. Anyway, Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair is arguably the best entry of the Danganronpa series in my opinion. The characters, the killings, the trials, literally everything in this game is done bigger and better than most of the other entries of the series. Anyway, the game follows a class of students that arrive on an island for a school vacation. However, things go horribly wrong when their vacation is turned into a killing game. For the most part, almost every character in this game has their darker traits come out at some point in the story. Yet, there's one character that always seems to be the light at the end of the tunnel. That of course is Nanami. Throughout the game, Nanami constantly fights to keep the class from turning on each other even in the darkest times of the story. On top of that, she proves to be one of the most helpful students in the class trials when trying to decipher who the killer is. Unfortunately, there's a very tragic reason for that. As it turns out, this world is in fact a virtual world. And these characters were all put in this virtual world because they were manipulated by an evil person and brainwashed into doing horrible things. The idea was to recover their true selves by spending time with each other, but a virus created from Junko Inoshima, the person that manipulated them, turned this project into a killing game instead. However, Nanami is different. She was actually an AI created from a real-life friend of theirs that died in the real world, and she was put here to assist them and help them recover their true selves. Unfortunately, things continued to get worse for her though. In a really fucked up way in which I don't really have time to dive into, Nanami was set up to be a culprit in one of the trials, and she was executed for it in a pretty horrifying way. Number 5, Ethan Winters, Resident Evil Village.
I'm so sorry. I love you. Keep Rose safe. Hey. And you tell yourself. Now come on, it's not that much further. Watch over her. Teach her to be strong. God damn it. Goodbye, Rosemary.
If there's one thing that we've learned about Ethan from the time that we spent with him in both games, it's that he's a family man who will do anything and everything to protect the people that he loves. We see that first in Resident Evil 7 when he goes through hell in order to save Mia, his wife. Then we see it all over again when he challenges an entire village of Lycans, a vampire family, and everything else in order to save his daughter Rose. However, we also learn a tragic truth in Resident Evil Village. As it turns out, Ethan never survived his encounter with Jack Baker. He was actually murdered by him, and the Ethan that we see now is actually a molded version of him. Still, even after learning about this, Ethan pushes through everything in order to face Mother Miranda one last time and save his daughter. After defeating Mother Miranda, Ethan realizes that he has very little time left. So he delivers Rose to Chris Redfield, says his final goodbye to her, which literally got me all choked up, and then faces the Megamycete before pulling the trigger to destroy the village and the Megamycete along with it. Most of the main characters of the Resident Evil universe have plot armor, let's be real. So seeing Ethan Winters actually die was both a big surprise and a tragic moment on its own. But here's the thing, it doesn't stop there. If you take a look at the Shadows of Rose DLC, Ethan Winters lives on in the Megamycete network. Here, he does everything he can to protect Rose and help her get rid of her powers, which she sees as a curse. Yet, when she realizes that her father is in trouble, she gets her powers back and uses it to stop Mother Miranda. It's in this moment that we get yet another tragic goodbye from a father to his daughter, but honestly, this one is even more heart-wrenching than the first time. Seriously, Capcom, how many times are you going to make us say goodbye to Ethan Winters? You might as well pull my heart out at this point. Okay, too soon? Number 4, Mayu, Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly.
Kill me.
The Fatal Frame franchise is easily one of the darkest survival horror video game series out there. If you like Silent Hill because of the dark and disturbing text it has on the genre, then trust me when I say you'll feel right at home with the Fatal Frame games. And when it comes to tragic backstories and sad moments, Fatal Frame has a lot of them to choose from. However, at least for me, nothing in this franchise compares to the death of Mayu in Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly. This of course takes place at the end of the game in which Mayu and Mio are forced to take part in the Crimson Sacrifice ritual. See, like the game before it, Fatal Frame 2 has a dark story in which the village performs gruesome sacrifices in order to keep the dark forces at bay. In the case of Fatal Frame 2, the ritual requires a younger twin to strangle an older twin. Doing so creates a crimson butterfly marking on the neck of the sacrificed twin. However, the ritual failed years prior to the start of the game, and when Mio and Mayu arrive, the village is full of vengeful ghosts around every corner. During their search of the village, Mio and Mayu become separated, and Mio spends a majority of the game searching for her twin sister Mayu. Eventually, they reunite at the end of the game, in which Mayu realizes what must be done thanks to her connection with Sai, the twin that failed to perform the ritual correctly thanks to her sister fleeing the village. At the site of the ritual, Mayu and the ghosts around them push Mio to strangle and kill Mayu, therefore performing the ritual and releasing the spirits of the village. What follows is a tragic scene in which we have one of the most heartbreaking cutscenes as Mio chases her sister's spirit, begging her to come back. Then when you add in the music to this already heartbreaking moment, you have one of the saddest moments in horror game history. Number 3, Brown, Royal Rose.
Your friend is in the bag. It's too late now. My friend! Give me back my friend!
It honestly kills me to talk about this entry as a dog owner myself, and I'm not gonna lie, part of me wanted to rank this as the number 1 entry on this list. But Brown's death in Royal Rose is one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've ever experienced in a horror game. From the moment Jennifer rescues this tied up Labrador, Brown acts as a faithful companion to Jennifer throughout the many dark and horrifying recreations of Jennifer's trauma. He attacks enemies, finds valuable resources, and keeps her company when everybody else around her bullies her and attacks her. Brown is a good boy, but from the very start of the game, it's not hard to recognize where the story is eventually going with this character. As it turns out, this entire game is one massive recreation of Jennifer's childhood trauma. Without spending too much time on the lore of Royal Rose, Jennifer eventually finds herself at the Rose Garden Orphanage after the death of her parents. Here, a group of kids have established their very own cult by the name of the Red Crown Aristocrats Club. The leader of the cult, Wendy, became close friends with Jennifer when they were kids. However, Jennifer eventually found a puppy, which I'm sure you could guess who that was. Jennifer became attached to Brown and fell in love with him immediately, and she eventually showed him off to Wendy. Unfortunately, Wendy didn't take this well at all, as she became jealous of Brown's relationship with Jennifer. After bullying Jennifer and making her life hell at an attempt for Jennifer to leave Brown behind, which makes absolutely no sense to me at all, Wendy made the decision to remove Brown from the equation completely. She kidnapped Brown, ordered the aristocrats to beat him to death, and then delivered Brown to Jennifer in a bloody brown bag. The Brown that we have seen throughout the game thus far is like everything else in this game. It's a figment of Jennifer's imagination as a way to cope with her trauma of losing him as a child. While Brown's outcome may have been predicted from the constant hints that we got throughout the game, watching the flashback sequence of Jennifer's best friend being brutally killed by a bunch of kids is without a doubt one of the darkest and most heartbreaking scenes in a horror game. Number 2, Sarah Miller, The Last of Us.
Oh no. Sarah. Move your hands, baby. I know, baby, I know. God. Listen to me, I know this hurts, baby. You're gonna be okay, baby. Stay with me. All right, I'm gonna pick you up. I know, baby, I know it hurts. Come on, baby, please. I know, baby, I know. Sarah. Baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Don't do this to me, baby. No. No. No, no, no. Please. 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 Please don't. Please.
So I know a lot of you guys might be thinking that I probably should have included a certain other character's death from The Last of Us 2, but honestly, I disagree. The more I think about it, the more I realize that there are not many characters that died in video games that actually made me tear up as much as I did when Sarah died in Joel's arms at the beginning of The Last of Us. Seriously, this was one of the most heartbreaking openings ever seen in a video game. First, we get a cute opening sequence with Sarah and Joel. It's one of the most charming scenes of the game actually, in which we get to see Joel as a father and his relationship with his daughter Sarah. In fact, it helps us to understand why Joel sees so much of her in Ellie later in the game when we see some similarities in their personality. Then we immediately become attached to Sarah as we get to control her as the player in the first few moments of the game, seeing things from her perspective. Sadly, this doesn't last long. After Joel and Sarah find themselves outrunning a bunch of infected creatures, they come across a soldier. The soldier is ordered to kill them in an effort to contain the infection, so he opens fire on them. At first, it looks like Joel managed to protect Sarah with his own body, but sadly, that's not the case. After the soldier is killed by Tommy, Joel looks over to see his daughter is shot, and she's crying in pain, and all Joel could do is just hold her in his arms. Without a doubt, this was one of the most heartbreaking moments ever seen in a video game, as a father had to watch his daughter slowly die in his arms, and it kills me just thinking about the scene. Again, I honestly can't think of many moments where a scene in a video game made me cry the first time I saw it, but this one broke me completely. Number 1, Lee, The Walking Dead TellTale series.
You're strong, Clem. You can do anything.
But I'm little.
Doesn't mean nothing. You're gonna see bad stuff, but it's okay.
My parents. It's so horrible.
I can't imagine, sweet pea.
And now, you? Please. Please don't be one of them. Please don't become a walker.
There's only one thing you can do. You know that.
While the last entry had me in tears the first time I played through The Last of Us, there's one entry on this list that gets me emotional every single time I replay the game. And that, of course, is the first season of the Walking Dead TellTale series. First off, this franchise easily has some of the best storytelling in a horror game. Sure, the gameplay isn't exactly the smoothest, but it's a story that really gets you invested. And just like the TV show, there's plenty of likable characters that unfortunately meet a grim fate. So choosing just one character for this franchise might seem pretty difficult, considering that this franchise could very well make up a whole list on its own. With that being said, nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to the death of Lee in the first season. Lee is the main protagonist of the first game of this fantastic franchise, and we first meet him in the back of a cop car moments before the outbreak occurs. Eventually, he'll escape from some zombies, only to then find a young girl hiding in a treehouse. This is the adorable badass Clementine. After overhearing a message on the answering machine in Clementine's house, Lee realizes that Clementine's parents are most likely dead or worse. So he takes Clementine in, and from this point on, Lee becomes a father figure towards Clementine as he vows to protect her throughout the game. Because this is a narrative-driven story created by TellTale Games, Lee has plenty of opportunities to build his relationship with Clementine and teach her how to survive in this post-apocalyptic world. Eventually, Clementine is kidnapped, and while Lee pursues the kidnapper, he's bitten by a zombie. This immediately punches the player in the gut, as by this point, Lee has become one of the most likable main protagonists of a video game. He does get the opportunity to cut off his arm if the player chooses to do so in order to prevent the spread of the infection, but it's too late. Eventually, he reunites with Clementine, saves her from the kidnapper, and they make their way across a city of zombies. After finding a safe place, Lee attempts to give Clementine one more lesson before he dies. He walks her through the process of getting a gun off of a zombie. Then the player can choose one of two endings for Lee. He can ask Clementine to shoot him before he changes, or Clementine could leave, which of course leads to Lee becoming a zombie. This moment is heartbreaking from start to finish, and even though we all realize what would be the end result from the moment Lee was bit, we still kept hoping that somehow Lee would find a way to survive. Unfortunately, he didn't, but he did train Clementine enough to the point where she would beat the odds and survive the apocalypse as a child time and time again throughout the franchise. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Lee's death in The Walking Dead the saddest death in a horror game, or is there someone else that you think deserves that title? Also, let me know if I missed any for this list. There's plenty of horror games out there, and with so many of them having great storytelling and tragic moments, I wouldn't be surprised if I missed one or two characters. So let me know down below any that I did miss and that you think deserved a spot on today's list. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Games. Take care.